Good afternoon. I'm Julia Coakley, Head of Operations, and on behalf of the MGAA, I'd like to welcome you to our webinar this afternoon, which is being delivered by My Black Dog. Before I introduce our presenters, I'd like to run through a few housekeeping points. Please ensure your microphone and your camera is off, and if you would like to ask a question, please use the chat button at the bottom of your screen, which will be answered during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. If we run out of time and don't have an opportunity to put your questions to our speaker, this will be answered post-event. The video will be available on our website and the MGAA YouTube channel. Please take time to respond to our feedback survey, which will be issued after this webinar, as this will enable us to deliver the best quality events to our membership. So today's webinar, My Black Dog, The Power of Empathy, is being delivered by Nikki Clark, CEO and founder, and Mark Glenister, Operations Associate. Nikki has struggled with clinical depression for most of her life through her own experience of feeling isolated and judged about her mental health. She wanted to create an inclusive and non-judgmental space for people to talk with others who have lived experience. My Black Dog became a charity in 2019 and saw a 2,000% increase in people using the service during lockdown. Nikki's goal is to raise funds and awareness of My Black Dog in order to reach more people who are struggling through dark days. Mark has dealt with depression and anxiety for most of his adult life. He initially became a volunteer for My Black Dog in July 2020 after being made redundant from his role in hospitality. He looks after the day-to-day running of the charity with an emphasis of ensuring shifts are covered and that guests obtain the best support that they can from the team of over 70 volunteers. Mark is a firm believer in the power of community and has created a volunteer community within My Black Dog that supports and looks after each other. All the volunteers have lived experiences of mental health issues, and the community is vital for their recovery as much as the guests. So Nikki, if I might hand over to you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you everyone so much for joining. You know, it's on a Tuesday at lunchtime. It is lovely to see so many people here listening and learning about mental health, so thank you all so much. I thought it would be best if we talked a little bit about who we are and how My Black Dog came about. Mark and I both have our own stories, and I think it's important because they're not unusual in terms of mental health. For myself, as you know, I'm the founder of My Black Dog, and I really started My Black Dog because of my own experience. It is a product of a lived experience. I've struggled with clinical depression my whole life, and a few years ago I had a traumatic event, and following that I had PTSD and severe anxiety, and the depression came flooding back. Now, I knew from previous experiences that I needed help, so I went to the doctor and I got some medication. And then I was put on a waiting list for the NHS counselling services, and I was on that list for about 3 months. That's actually a relatively short amount of time, because now that average is about 18 months, and we've known people who've been on the list for up to 4 years. During that time when I was waiting, and I was in a very bad place. I didn't want to talk to my friends and family about what was going on. I was very ashamed about what had happened, and I couldn't bear to burden them. Actually, I thought actually with some of my friends that they may judge me or leave me. In retrospect, I've actually got better friends than that, but when you're in it, you don't really see that. You think this is me, and I'm in it alone, and nobody's going to understand this, and I don't know who to talk to. And I think that was the most crushing thing for me, is that I really was desperate to talk to someone, but I was so scared that I would be judged for it and that I would be left alone in it. When I did finally speak to a counsellor, and I do just want to put up a disclaimer here before I say this, I think counselling is wonderful and I think it can change and save your life. But when I spoke to a counsellor, after those months of agonising wait, I said something very terrible, and I said, I don't want to live anymore. And they got out a pencil and a pad, and they said, oh, right. And how does that make you feel? And it was a clinical approach, not a human approach. And I thought, gosh, you're very qualified, but you don't know how this feels. That was my response to it. And I think what would have been more healing for me at that time would be to speak to somebody who understood me. And I remember thinking, oh, I just wish I could talk to someone who gets this. And that's how My Black Dog came about. I wanted to put people in touch with other people who've had a lived experience, because if you can speak to someone who's been through it before, the fear of the judgment isn't there anymore. You know, it's taken out, because that person really does understand. There's a lot of misconceptions with mental health, and we are making leaps and bounds in society on how we address this, but there is a long way to go. And I think that when you're in those early stages and you're struggling, and maybe you're waiting list, or maybe you haven't even got to that point yet, what we're very good at is saying, I'm okay, I'm fine, I'll deal with it. You know, I don't want to talk to my friends about it. They've got their own problems. I can't bear to burden my family. I'll just handle it. And that's a very dangerous road to go down, because you do end up having a crash. And when you have that crash, then you think, oh, I'll get some help. And by that point, it's almost too late. So I think we're going to have a poll now. So the question is, have you, or do you know anyone that has suffered with mental health issues? And already, here we go, we're seeing those numbers.
Wow.
I always am amazed by this question, just because I think 5 years ago, or 10 years ago, if we'd asked this question, I wonder how many people would be honest, because, you know, I don't think I could have started My Black Dog 10 years ago. I don't think we were in that space. So there we go, 100%. And this is not unusual, because we know so many people struggled through the pandemic, and so many people struggled with their mental health before the pandemic. You know, it was an epidemic in this country before, really. And then the pandemic hit, and we were faced with isolation and, you know, being away from family. We all know this. But I don't think anyone wasn't tested mentally through that time. So now we are obviously seeing a lot more people. So we will move on to some stats. So this is the state of mental health in the UK today. 1.6 million people are waiting for treatment for mental health services. Now that's a shocking stat. But more than that, another 8 million people are unable to get help as they're considered not ill enough. Now let me break that down for you. What that means is that if you can't show that you are in desperate need of medical assistance, you will not be able to be put on that waiting list. And we have had lots and lots of people tell us that they have been told, unless you have made an attempt on your life, you will not be able to get professional help. So it's almost as if they're encouraging somebody to do something drastic in order to get treatment. And that is just disproportionate. We know the pandemic had a huge impact on mental health, and the backlog. I mean, the backlog of the NHS is huge anyway for any medical service. For mental health, actually, the recent announcement of the £5.4 billion for the pandemic recovery, mental health was not on that list. So we know that there's been a 24% increase of all ages for people who need referrals from the previous year, and 1.5 million people were in contact with mental health services in June 2021. As you heard earlier, My Black Dog saw actually a 2,030% increase in the people using our services during that time. I'd now like to take this opportunity to pass over to my colleague Mark, who began as a volunteer at My Black Dog and is now the operations associate here. Mark.
Thank you, Nikki. Thank you all for joining us this Tuesday lunchtime. I would say I'll try and keep this light-hearted, but it's not really a light-hearted story, so I'm sorry for that, but it's an important story to tell. So 2018, I was in a very good place. I'd always struggled with my mental health, certainly anxiety, lack of self-confidence, lack of self-belief. But in 2018, I was probably at the lowest I'd ever been. This picture is up here because there'd be many a day that I would stand at my local train station, deciding what I was going to do, deciding if I was going to take that little step forward as the train approached. I was constantly having a battle with my internal dialogue. And the battle is where your internal dialogue is telling you that you're not good enough, that you won't be missed if you do something, and people will be better off without you. So there you go. So this was a daily occurrence to me, and I was in a pretty dark place. But thankfully, with my internal dialogue, I always had one voice that was slightly louder that would tell me that I was worthwhile and that I did matter. And that was kind of important to me because that did get me through the majority of what I was going through at the time. So I'm not expecting anybody to know who this gentleman is. His name is Scott Hutchinson, and he was the lead singer of a band called Frightened Rabbit. In 2018, on Wednesday, May the 9th, in the early hours, he tweeted the following tweets, which basically said, "I'm away now, thanks." And then minutes later, "Be so good to everyone you love. It's not a given. I'm so annoyed that it's not. I didn't live by that standard and it kills me. Please hug your loved ones." He walked away from the hotel he was staying at the time, and the next day his body was found in the Firth of Forth at Port Edgar, which is on the south side. He'd taken his own life. In an interview just before this, he spoke about his mental health and anxiety and how it made him feel. So he said at the time, "I've always seen that kind of emotional turmoil as an illness. It's one that lasts for quite a long time and you can't be fixed. You know, you describe it as a hurt. Why would you describe it as that if it weren't actually painful? It's not just mental torment." Now, I'd read this interview and it had struck a chord with me at the time, but when Scott decided that life wasn't worth living anymore, it really affected me. I was a huge fan of the band, and I was certainly a huge fan of his very heartfelt lyrics. Over the days after it was discovered that he had passed away, I read lots of the comments of that in papers and online, comments from his friends and family. And the thing that struck me about all of this was if you'd taken his name out of these interviews and put my name in there, it would have read much the same, apart from being a successful songwriter. But everyone was speaking about him as if it was me. I had the same characteristics as him. I was very good at wearing a mask and hiding what I was going through. And my closest friends, my loved ones, didn't even know what I was going through on a daily basis. So his death really pushed me. It made me reach out and ask for help. I went to see the doctor. As Nikki said, when you go to see a GP, you tend to get a lot of help if you mention the word suicidal. And I was at the time. So they certainly took me seriously. I got counselling. And I'm still on a path now. I still have my dark days. I still have the days where I don't feel like doing anything. I don't feel like getting out of bed. I feel as if the world's against me. But these days are short-lived now. They're the days that I tend to focus on myself. I tend to do the things that I know make me happy. So that's listening to music, reading a book, going for a walk. I kind of appreciate these days now because they make me want to look after myself instead of just carrying on as I normally do. So I kind of admitted to my friends and family what was going through. I told my wife that I'd thought about killing myself on numerous occasions. And it's been a steep learning curve since that day, one of which I'm still learning. The plus side of all this, and the side where hopefully it does get happy, is that, as Nikki said earlier, I started volunteering for the charity in 2018 when I was made redundant. 2019 when I was made redundant. And since then, I've become part of the fabric of my day job. I help Nikki on a day-to-day basis, and I look after the volunteers that work for us now. So we talk about empathy, and obviously the description of this presentation is the power of empathy. It's something that if you've been through something, only you can give. Everybody can give sympathy, but unless you've struggled, unless you've suffered from something, or you've been through something, empathy is a really hard thing to do. The quote you see on your screens is by a lady called Brené Brown, who is a US lecturer and a writer. And she had this, if you look on YouTube, there's a really lovely video that talks about this. But basically empathy has no script. There's no right or wrong way to do it. It's simply listening and holding space, withholding judgment, emotionally connecting and communicating that incredible message of you are not alone. And that is my black dog in a nutshell. It's everything that we do. It's all that our volunteers do. As we've said a few times, all of our volunteers are going through mental health issues or have been through them. They all understand that feeling. And when they're on shift, they're there just to make a human connection with somebody that is at that stage I was at 3 years ago or 4 years ago, where I didn't have anybody to turn to. I didn't know if I could tell my friends how I was feeling. I didn't know how they were going to react. We're there to give the correct reaction. We're there to listen without any judgment, and we're there to show empathy, and it's what makes us so special.
Mark, thank you so much. That's fantastic, and thank you so much for sharing your experiences. I know it's not easy to do that, so thank you. So My Black Dog, just back to our service and how we are reaching people. It is a peer-to-peer service, and we are online through a chat function. It's not a phone line, and I did that on purpose because actually it's very hard to say these things out loud. They're not easy words to say to anyone, let alone a stranger. And if you are being secretive about it, which lots of people are, then you'll have to go find a quiet room and a quiet place and shut the door and hope no one walks in. And if they do, then you're just going to bottle it and put the phone down. And I didn't want to give someone another reason not to have a conversation that could potentially save your life. So, we live in a digital age. We are using this web chat function, and it's completely anonymous. And I also think that is appealing for some people, that they don't have to give their name, they don't have to tell anyone anything about themselves. They can just have a chat with someone who understands them. And you can come online every day, and we do have people who do that. So we have seen a huge increase in people using the service, and last year we saw double the users from the year before. We have 70 active volunteers, but many more who dip in and out, depending on how they're doing and how their black dog is. And we are available and free every day. So we would love some support. We are growing. We became a charity in March 2019, and with the sudden growth and all the people using our service, we definitely are in need of some more support, some more fundraisers, some more volunteers. The bottom line is, the more people that know about us, the more people we can help. So if you are interested at all, this deck will be sent out to you, and you can contact us at any time, to either myself or to Mark. And now, questions and answers, if you have any. I'm sorry as well about the noise our end. I think someone's having a competition in the kitchen to see how many spoons they can drop.
Thank you for that, Nikki, and Mark, thank you for that. That's both really helpful. Just to kind of start on what you've just finished on now, I guess when you talk about support on social media, the thing I find, certainly from an MGAA perspective, is when you follow a company and you see a post that you like and you support, if you either like it or share it, that gets that out to your own followers. So I think, the social media thing, in terms of raising the profile of My Black Dog, I think that's a fairly easy win, something that we could all do as kind of participants in this webinar today, is to
yes, absolutely.
like your post.
I know there's some conflicting evidence about mental health and social media, but I feel when used correctly, it's definitely a force for good. And a small thing like sharing with someone who could be struggling, who maybe is using their phone as opposed to actually reaching out to a human being, if they know that there's someone who they can talk to who's there and online right now, they may be inclined to do so.
Thank you. So I do have a couple of questions for you. Do you think that companies are doing enough to look after their employees' mental health?
In a nutshell, no, I'm afraid. It's not. I don't think it's deliberate. I just think there's a lack of resources out there on how people can be helping. Like I said earlier, mental health is very new. We didn't talk about this 10 years ago. We're still struggling to talk about it, and there's still a lot of misinformation out there about mental health and what it is. I think, companies really have changed things, really are moving around, but there's still so much work to be done. There really is more and more that you can do to help the staff, to help through these struggles, knowing, in fact, of the 100% people who you know or yourself have struggled with mental health. Pretty much everyone in your workforce will be struggling at some point or another.
Thank you. So I do think some companies offer their employees one mental health day a year. What do you think the benefits of one day a year would be, and is that enough?
The trouble with assigning a day is that you can't plan your mental health. It's not, you may go, I'm not feeling good today, I think I'll take a mental health day. But the thing is that it may not last just a day. It may last a week or 6 months. For me, it's a life sentence. I'll always struggle with it. It's just depending on how I can do that. At My Black Dog, we actually have unlimited mental health days because every single person involved in the organisation struggles with their mental health. And it makes us more productive for it because there's an understanding there and because there is an empathy about it. So there's no shame. And I think that helps with the productivity. Mark, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, no, I'm going back on both points. Having worked for large organisations, I know once I admitted to my bosses that I was struggling and I had been diagnosed with depression, it became really difficult for me, and that's one of the reasons why I left the company. But also, I think people still, they want to talk, but they're quite reluctant to talk to the people that they work for or talk to their colleagues, because there is still the stigma attached. Yes, it's improved greatly, but I think people are still reluctant to speak directly with either their bosses or their colleagues because of the stigma that might get attached to it, and they don't know if that's going to affect anything for their future within that company.
Yeah, a good point. So it's not only that, if you like, desire to have that anonymity about your poor mental health, it's about the repercussions of actually sharing, being brave enough to share and not really knowing what implications that has. So it's a very good point. Do you think in that case that there should be more education for employers on somebody who has mental health issues doesn't mean that they can't do their job as well as a person?
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at the volunteer base that we have, it is very, very apparent that you can have a joyful and successful and incredible life and still struggle with your mental health because our volunteers are living proof of that. And I don't think you're unable to do your job if you struggle with your mental health. If anything, I feel that you're more capable. If you've ever struggled and you know what it's like to sort of been taking bullets, but the bullets come from the inside, as Carrie Fisher quoted once, and you've got to battle with yourself and struggle through the day and survive the day and still go to work and turn up, well, that makes you incredibly resilient and what I hope would be a valued member of an organisation.
Thank you. So some companies, and I actually saw it on the bottom of an email the other day, some companies have mental health first aiders. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, actually, Mark is a mental health first aider, and you found it very valuable to go on the course.
I did it when I wasn't working. It was just something to do with something I was quite passionate about doing. A lot of companies are investing in this now, but you could kind of be quite cynical, say it's a tick box exercise. I think it's great to have people that are doing these things. I think it's great to have people qualified in these roles. Again, when it comes back down to if a company's doing that, the ability of people to then want to speak to somebody that is a mental health first aider, I think that stigma needs to be taken away, or the company needs to become quite open about their policies with regards to mental health. And then you may find people want to utilise that service a lot more. They're great. It's a wonderful course, and it's really helpful to understand. And if you have first aiders in your company, you should certainly have mental health first aiders in your company as well, because they go hand in hand with each other. So it's an important thing to do. Maybe it's the bigger picture that needs to be looked at.
Yes, I mean, yeah, it's a very good point, Mark, because I think mental health first aid is fantastic in the fact that they can look for signs which people think you may not be able to see. I mean, people who are struggling with their mental health are most likely trying to hide it, and they're probably trying to hide it at work. So having someone who's there to be able to spot the signs and be able to, you know, help that person is vital. But the trust factor is the one that comes in, because if it is part of your in-house operations or it's part of your HR process, there's a certain distrust that comes with that, because mental health has been and it continues to be weaponized. So it's a loaded gun you hand to someone to use at any time against you, and in the workplace and in any relationship. So I know from my experience, revealing too much about my mental health at work was very damaging to my career. So I do see it from employees' point of view that they may not trust a mental health first aider. As sad as that is, I think it is true.
I suppose with a less cynical hat on, and I'm not saying that cynicism is incorrect, but perhaps with a less cynical hat on, you could view it that the organisation that you works for places enough importance on it that they are giving people a potential route into speaking to somebody without necessarily formalising to perhaps a manager or you know.
Yeah, and that's actually, we've seen lots of positivity with that. Sorry if it didn't come across cynical.
No.
We have seen, and it has been wildly popular with lots of organisations, and it very much depends on the individual, I suppose, and the organisation and their ethos.
I think if you incorporate into a company, if you have a confidentiality around it, where there may be the person you're speaking to, then it doesn't go any further than that person, unless they feel that they need to, then you probably get more of an uptake on that.
Mm.
Yeah, and again, as you've pointed out, really, it's really kind of a company by company basis, isn't it? What your thoughts are on the company and perhaps how sincere that support is, and whether it's, you know, extends right through to the whole of the care of your mental health, or if it is just appearing to be a tick box exercise. I've got another question. Just for delegates' purposes, if you do drop a question in the chat box, it will remain anonymous unless you chose otherwise. So do feel free to ask any questions. I won't reveal who submitted the question. So what are your suggestions for helping a loved one who is struggling with their mental health? How can we best support them?
Well, that's a great question. It's really, when someone you love is in pain, it's really easy to just start suggesting a lot of things. Have you tried this? Have you tried that? Have you tried, should we do this? Should we do that? And actually, for someone who's struggling with their mental health, this is actually quite counterproductive. More helpful things would be, I'm here if you want to talk, I'm listening when you would like to, because it's more about giving that person the ability to share when they're comfortable with it. Because if you pressurize them into trying to do something that for them is horrifying, you know, have you tried yoga? You know, some people who are struggling can't get out of bed, so yoga is an impossibility. And it's only because, you know, you're kind and you're trying to help them that you want to make these suggestions, but giving them space and holding space, allowing them to come to you and saying, this is what I need, and giving them what they've asked for, as opposed to what you think is best for them, I think is much more healing.
Yeah, I would just add to that, if a loved one has reached out to you and said that they're feeling that way, that's a huge step. That's a step that a lot of people don't take. So if somebody has confided you in that way, that means that they trust you and that they're reached out to you because they know that you're going to look after them. So yeah, initially that's a huge step. And as Nikki said, I had this with my wife a couple of years ago when I was struggling, and it was really kind of hard sometimes to turn around and say, no, I don't want to do that. That's not what it's all about. But as long as the communication is clear and as long as you're being upfront and honest about things, yeah, it's there to support, and maybe not kind of sometimes, as Nick said, let's do this, let's do that. It's because mental health can affect you in so many different ways, and yeah, sometimes you just want somebody to listen to you, and that's it, not give you any answers, not give you any suggestions. You just need to talk to somebody and let it out.
Yeah.
Great advice, and it's so true that, you know, if any of us on the call have been approached by a friend or you approach someone, there is so many occasions where you just want to be listened to. You don't want someone to solution mode. So I think that's a great point from you both, and thank you very much for that. I've got another question. Is there any support for the loved ones supporting those with mental health issues?
Yeah, I mean, we have people come through to us and talk to us that their children or their partner or their parents or their sister, brother are struggling and how they should deal with it. And yeah, I mean, we support people like that on a daily basis. But if you look at most of the major websites out there, there's lots of places to go to speak to people and to get some advice on how to deal with things. Yeah, I mean, we would be a good starting point, obviously, but yes, there is plenty of support out there for that type of issue.
Thank you, Mark. So another question. As a company, how should management look after someone who has just come back to work after suffering from poor mental health?
Well, really good question, because, you know, obviously you're keen to get your employees back to work and get them back on track on where they were, but I would say generally does it, because if you try and push someone too hard too soon, they won't respond well. I also think that the empathy, and this again why empathy is so important, needs to be there. Don't treat it as though they've had a holiday. Someone once asked me, how was my holiday when I came back after mental health leave, and it nearly broke me. It just diminishes your whole experience. So I think understanding the depth of what they've had to go through, and then to get back to work, and knowing as well that you know about it, and probably that the company knows about it too. You know, they're very exposed, so just be delicate. You know, just easy does it. Ask them how would they like to proceed and what would help them be most productive, because you know, people have different ways of working, and it could be, oh, I might need to do this one thing, or actually I just need a bit of fresh air every now and then to sort of help me get over through this, and then I can get back to my desk and start working. You know, open the conversation, see what comes from it. You know, we're all complex individuals. Different people need different things.
Yeah, I think it's no one size fits all, as with most things in life. I know when I went back to work, I didn't want people fussing over me. I just wanted to get back to work and just do my job. And so I found that quite stressful, and I had to kind of say that I just let me get on my job and I'm fine. I don't need people fussing, but other people might need that. As Nick said, they may need to be handled a bit differently. Again, it needs to be an open and honest conversation. You can't second guess these things, and everybody's different. So I think initially management would need to have just an open and honest conversation with the person coming back on how they would like to proceed and how they would like to fit back into the workspace.
And frequent conversations, I guess it's no good and not helpful. I don't suppose if you've got someone returning to work and you just arrange a weekly catch-up to see how it's going, because things can change very rapidly, can't they, during the day, depending on what somebody coming back is facing, what they're having to deal with. So I guess the frequency of those meetings is very important.
Absolutely, and not just at work, but in general. The more we talk about these things, the more normalised they'll become. So if you've had a friend that's gone through something recently, check in, see if they're okay. It will make the world a difference. It just someone going, are you all right? Just thinking of you, or I'm here if you need me, in a text. It's honestly, just that sitting with you is massively healing.
Definitely.
Thank you. So another question. Thank you for these. This is incredibly helpful. What if we have tried to support our loved one dealing with mental health, but they're harming themselves, but don't wish to have support or help? What if we are very concerned for their safety?
This is really hard, and because they're not talking to you. I think probably the best thing is to try, first of all, you need to see if they'd be open to talking to a GP, because this goes into sort of professional services realm. If they're not comfortable talking to you, maybe find out who they are comfortable talking to. Is it a friend? Is it someone professional like a counsellor? Is it a service like My Black Dog? Self-harm is a very scary thing for you to witness and for someone to go through. There is always dark days when it comes to that, but that's not to say there won't be light at the end of the tunnel. You just have to keep trying, and an event just gives them the space to open up. If you push too hard, they may, recluse, and that's not what you need. But there are lots of services. If you wanted to email us separately, we've got lots of signposts specifically for self-harm and mental health. So if that person wanted to contact me, it'll all be anonymous, info@myblackdog.co. I'd be happy to give you some referrals.
I think with anything like that, it's about just keeping the lines of communication open. And with anything in life, the more you push and pressure people to do things, the more they're going to dig their heels in. I think certainly with mental health, the person needs to want to ask for help themselves. So the fact that they've kind of reached out initially is always a good sign. And then it's just kind of keeping that communication open, seeing who they will talk to, as Nikki said, whether that's a friend, whether that's somebody professional. But again, it's got to be on their terms. It's really hard to force people to do anything like that.
A very, very difficult situation, but some great thoughts there on possible avenues. And just to reiterate, Nikki, thank you for that offer of taking an email directly from one of our members to discuss further.
Anytime. I guess for anyone on the call.
Thank you. And then with regard to our own mental health in the workplace, what suggestions do you have for that? How can we keep ourselves mentally healthy on a day-to-day basis?
I love this question because it's actually rather positive. There's so many things you can do. One of the main things that I'm going to tell you to do is just put your phone in a drawer and walk away. Your phone is your work, and it's all the time. It's very difficult when you finish work. I don't know if you can. I know everyone's got very stressful, long jobs, and you want to be connected and plugged in, but it will wear you down. So if you can, take a little time, put that phone away, take a breath, go for a walk. Just a break from the stimulation, because we're constantly bombarded, aren't we, with so many things at work and social media and your phones and emails and texts and things. So if you can just go for a walk and just take a beat, that is massively helpful.
Yeah.
You've got some ideas.
No, definitely. I've actually, because I look after our volunteers, I've got shift managers that look after the shifts, but I'm on call in the evening. But this week I've kind of said to both my shift managers that if they have a problem, they're to phone me, because I'm putting my phone to one side after 6 o'clock at night now, and just putting it away and then just concentrating on stuff, reading books, listening to music, because I know what I'm like. I'm sitting there the whole night constantly checking my phone to make sure nothing's happened. So both the girls that work with me have kind of agreed to phone me if something important's happened, and that for me will help me massively. But as Nikki said, yeah, try and get away from your phone or any screen time if you can. Get up, have a walk around, go out, get some fresh air. If your office allows dogs, have a dog in the office. It's amazing. Yeah. We do that sometimes. It's just do something that makes you feel good, that makes you feel happy or relaxed.
Yeah, and for the managers, I know it's hard to say, oh, I've got to get this out, or I better email them. But if you can restrict those emails to work hours, you'll have more productive, more happy staff.
Great ideas there, thank you. And actually, a good number of what you've suggested, there are such easy things to do. Pick up a book, listen to music, go for a walk. They're not things that take a huge commitment of time or effort. So they're great ideas. And with regard to your thoughts on phone, it ties in nicely with another question that's just come in regarding whether you think social media has an impact on mental health. But before you respond to that, there's nothing wrong, and it's a great idea. I think you mentioned that, Mark, to tell your bosses, your manager or your team members that you are available. However, the phone will be put down at a certain time, and then you're available for calls for emergency, because I think every one of us is guilty of being glued to our phone to keep an eye on emails, as though, if we don't, the world will collapse. So again, a great piece of advice there. Yes, so coming back to the question, do you think social media has an impact on mental health?
Yes, definitely. It can have a real negative impact, but it can have a real positive impact as well. Speaking for myself, I know Nikki has other views on it. I certainly with stuff like Instagram. I mean, I'm only on Facebook and Instagram, and on Instagram, the only feeds I have are ones that are positive stories or things that I like. So the bands that I follow, chefs that I like, and just positive news stories. So whenever I look at my social media feed, it's just full of nice stuff. And on Facebook, I kind of went for a whole, just getting rid of people that just I felt were toxic or were just saying some really toxic things that I just didn't need on my news feed. We know what it's like. People hide behind social media and can be really nasty people. I'd probably say things that if they were face to face with you, they wouldn't dare say to you. I think it's all about minimising what you look at, and then again, maybe just having certain social media time during the day and not be kind of constantly checking things. Yeah, for me, I think it's positive, but I know how negative it can be as well. But
yeah, it can. It just depends. It very much depends. I actually, if you look on our social media, I was very much encouraged to do the stories on Instagram, and was asked if I could to help, you know, kind of get the word out about my background, to start doing stories. And I found it so inexplicably stressful because I'd had to sort of do stories of me and videos of me and me talking, and it was just an absolute nightmare. And I actually just asked instead if anyone of our volunteers would like to do it instead. So now we've got all this lovely feedback and positivity from the volunteers who actually enjoy doing it because they love sharing their morning and tips and tricks of the day. Whereas for me, I just would love to not look at it ever because I find it so difficult. But yeah, we're all different, aren't we?
yeah.
I think as well, with the media, it's very common, and most people will do it. They show the positive side of their life, which is great on the one hand, but on the other hand, if you're looking at somebody's great looks, great physique, great home, great holidays, great possessions, great family times, great times with their friends, if there's any aspect of that, let alone all of it, if there's any aspect of that you don't have that you would like or you want to improve, I think that can cause a negativity in itself when, you know, that whole vision of what people upload to social media is not reality. So everybody has insecurities about their looks, about their figure, about their job, about et cetera, that I think that can potentially have a harmful effect on people, you know, from a social media perspective, that you're aspiring to have a look or a life that is just not realistic. So I think that can also be very harmful. And I would like to think more for the younger generation.
Yeah,
but
I think it's a generational thing, definitely.
Yeah.
I certainly, if you looked at my Instagram account, it's pictures of my cats, pictures of food I've cooked, pictures of gigs that I've gone to, and then positive posts about mental health. I try not to post pictures of myself because, like, if I'm very conscious, and I've got anxiety and stuff like that. But I think it is definitely a generational thing, and it's gonna get worse over the next few years, especially with everything that's happened in the last couple of years. And I think look for positive stories, but look for real positive stories, not some kind of fake
key, isn't it?
Positivity.
Yeah, that's the key. I don't have any more questions unless our delegates wanted to drop a last minute question in. But I just wonder if we can just take a few moments. Could we, if you like, recap on if any of those that have joined us today want to make contact with My Black Dog, whether it's with regard to support because they're supporting someone with mental health problems, or for themselves, could you just perhaps recap on what it is that they would experience and what sort of assistance they would get?
Absolutely. So if anyone, in terms of the service that we're offering?
Yes.
So we are an online chat service. You can visit us through the website, which is on your screen right now, and you just click on the green button and you can just start a chat. You'll be put in contact with a real person who's had a real experience, who's a volunteer, and they are there to start a chat with you. We're online every day and it's always free.
Is it 24/7? Okay.
It's not 24/7. The opening hours are on the website, but mostly it's in the evenings and at the weekends. We'd love to be online 24/7, but we need more funding.
Understandably so. Okay, well, thank you so much. It's been really interesting today, and I think there's so many things that you've covered today that will absolutely resonate with those on the call just by virtue of the results from the poll. I've just got a comment come in. Thank you for a very interesting and insightful session from someone who's suffered with anxiety for many years, also a mental health first aider too, and can vouch for how beneficial and useful the course was. I will check out My Black Dog on social media. So great point to end. Thank you again. I do hope we can have you back in a few months' time to run a similar session. I think it's incredibly helpful. To those that joined us today, thank you so much. Really quite an emotive topic, but one that, again, going by the poll, everybody has an empathy for, whether it's looking after somebody else or they've got a particular interest in their own mental health that maybe isn't as good as it could be. So thank you for joining us. We will send a feedback survey out post-event. We would like to get your feedback on the relevance and the usefulness of this webinar, so do please take a moment to complete that. And that just leaves me to say thank you again for joining us. Thank you to Nikki and Mark, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thanks very much.
Thank you.